So let's go. My name is Philippe Dam. I'm the Advocacy Director for Human Rights Watch, working from Brussels. And it's really a pleasure to welcome all of you for this event today. It's also, I also want to thank very sincerely the MEPs hosting this event, Rosa Thun, Petras Ostrevicius, Isabel Santos, heidihautal, and helmut.scholz, as well as their political groups, EPP, SND, Renew Europe, the Green EFA, and the Left for their co-sponsorship for this event. It's a very timely discussion, as 2 years ago, the EU has adopted its Central Asia strategy, which has a stronger language on human rights, which shows greater prioritization of human rights issues. Nevertheless, Central Asia remains the theater of human rights abuses, and in some cases of very egregious and grave human rights violations. So today's discussion is an important opportunity to take stock of what the EU does, of what the situation is, of what the EU can continue to do or do better. Of course, both us as international organizations, as well as civil society activists from the regions, have really strong expectations towards the European Union and the role it can play. But today is a good opportunity to take stock of where we are and where we're going. Just a few technical points. As you know, this meeting is public. You can follow it on Zoom. You can follow it on Facebook. There is simultaneous interpretation in English and Russian, although interpretation in both languages is only available on Zoom. You can find the link, if you're following us from Facebook, you can find the link to the Zoom event on the comments section. You will be able to make comments and ask questions both in the chat function on Zoom, as well as in the comment section on Facebook. And the last point is that the event is being recorded, as you saw at the opening of this meeting, and will be archived online. I'll stop here and move directly to the hosting MEPs, to offering them to make a few opening remarks. And I will start with Rosa Thun from the EPP. MEP Thun, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Philippe Dam, and thank you for this introduction, but especially thank you to everybody who joined us today, my colleagues. This is a very happy situation that there is a group of us who really are involved in the issues, especially human rights in the Central Asia, and that we can cooperate together and together with you all. This is really the most important, that you are here. We have, especially this meeting is especially for social activists, for NGOs, for non-governmental organizations, and the voice of theirs is not always heard, especially in official meetings. And we as members of the European Parliament have every now and then opportunities to meet officials, but much more seldom people who are from organizations like those that you represent. So this is for us crucial and most important. We met yesterday, several members, Mrs. Elvira Azimova, who is Human Rights Commissioner in the Republic of Kazakhstan, and spoke to her, with her, very openly and sincerely. And it is our aim to hear your voices, and also she participates now in our meeting, and maybe some other officials as well, to hear you very clearly. So we will be most grateful if you speak, if we have a very open meeting, and tell each other also issues that are not always heard and that may be sometimes very difficult. We expect an EU-Asia Civic Forum in October, and maybe this is a little bit a parallel one, or maybe an introduction. We would encourage very much the organizers of the Civic Forum to invite the people like yourself. We haven't seen them on the list yet, but I hope very much that they will be invited, and if not, then we can organize meeting like this one. Maybe it is the very beginning, but what changes the world for better are always people who are organized in a way like you are in non-governmental organizations, civic organizations, and that is why I am especially grateful that we can be connected with you from Brussels, with Central Asia, with the 4 countries we are connected with. This is for us extremely precious, and we want to hear from you, and those who listen to us should also hear from you. And the voice platform, the voice should really be for you. This meeting yours. This meeting is for you. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, MEP Rosatun. And I turn now to Petras Austrevicius from Renew Europe. MEP Austrevicius, you have the floor.
Thank you, Philippe, and thank you to Human Rights Watch for moderating this important event. And I welcome everybody at this panel, at this exchange and debate, which is in fact organized by 5 major political groups in the European Parliament, starting from Conservatives, Liberal Democrats, Social Democrats, Greens, and the left. So it represents a very wide and very, I would say, visible spectrum, political spectrum. And I believe and I hope that this debate will provide us with more means and evidence how the European Union's policy in relationship vis-a-vis each and every Central Asia country might be more efficient, and not ignoring at any case human rights dimension. Well, let's be open. According to the international organizations, I mean, the human rights situation in the region as such remains very worrisome. And just to mention, large-scale arrests, harassment, torture, ill treatment, somehow, I mean, for too long became as business as usual. So it can't be ignored. So we have to take it into account, building our relationship, whatever we speak, business, social, cultural, political. I hope the human rights dimension will always be an important factor in our relationship. And again, so I'm looking forward so much to the discussion coming from all countries' representatives. We are here to listen to you in order to understand, I mean, the whole spectrum of developments. Because, let's be frank, again, violations of human rights might be very direct, but might be very indirect, somehow, invisible. But the feelings of the civil society, I mean, the situation, and I would say, I mean, the state of play is really not the best one, once especially you meet civil society representatives. So that's why we are here to listen to you in order to draw some conclusions, not to be deceived, not to be disoriented by some information sometimes we receive only from the official sources. And I welcome you once again. Be brave, be open-minded, and I'm looking forward for our great exchange. Thank you, Philippe.
Thanks a lot, Petras. And I now turn to Isabel Santos from the SND. MEP Santos, you
Hello, Philippe. Thank you very much. Thank you to Human Rights Watch, and thank to my colleagues for all the cooperation in organizing this important event. We have a representation of 5 political parties in the European Union, in the European Parliament, and this is very significant, the presence of all these members of European Parliament and this political representation. Today we will be focusing on problems felt by human rights defenders, and I must say that this is a very important focus in our work. As everybody knows, I'm a member of Foreign Affairs Committee and Human Rights Subcommittee. And in the last annual report on human rights and democracy, I made it a point to include the clear references about the situation of human rights defenders and of course situation of human rights in Central Asia and in the rest of the world. And this is very important to continue to do this assessment on this topic because we know how much the situation is not coming better, and sometimes in some points is worsening in many countries. I also would like to take this chance to apologize me because I had a change of my schedule, and I will need to leave before the end, but those interventions that I can't follow, I will be seeing after by the recording that we will have at our disposal. I'm looking forward to listen the testimonies of all these activists. Some of them are friends from long time, very long time, since my previous life in OSCPA, and it was very good to see them now. I'm very happy to see all of you. I ask to all of you that, as usual, you can talk frankly, and it's very important to have a very open and frank talk, because all the information that you are providing us is helpful information to have a better intervention in what is related to defend human rights and democracy. And I will be listening to you because the voices of human rights today are not us, but you. And it's to listen to you that we are here. Thank you very much. And I hope see you soon. See you soon. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, MEP Santos. And I now have heidihautal from the
yes, good afternoon. I'm in Finland. I'm preparing for a TV discussion on the future of the European Green Deal. But I also greet all the old and new friends from Central Asian countries. And I thank the colleagues who have co-organized this event. Indeed, as it has been said by several, this shows the unity of the European Parliament and our deep interest in the situation of Central Asia in the 6 countries. And I must say, I'm very pleased also to see a Mongolian representative among the speakers, because we sometimes forget that there is such a country in Central Asia. It's an important country. And the Parliament has even received the president, and who made a great speech on rule of law some years back. But anyway, my notable experience with Central Asian human rights situation was when I was able to host the first ever meeting of the 5 legal defenders, ombudsmen of the region in Helsinki when I was Minister for International Development. And I realized that there was such a potential for the cooperation between the legal defenders to compare notes and to try to have a peer review, peer process to support each and everyone's independence, because the legal defenders must be independent of the government and of the executive to really conduct their work to defend human rights. I'm aware that the situation of democracy and rule of law is very fragile and also very different in the 6 countries. But I'd like to mention that there's a great instrument that the European Union has. Uzbekistan, which has, in my understanding, undergone quite deep changes since the time of Karimov, is now joining the EU trade mechanism, GSP+, which means that they have to ratify and implement 27 international human rights conventions. And we in the Parliament are very carefully and diligently observing how this happens. So we have also trade-related instruments that could be encouraging for the situation of human rights. Lastly, maybe just a word on Kazakhstan, because I understand that the legal defender, Mrs. Azimova, is among the speakers and participants here. The Parliament's resolution, which was adopted recently, is quite a serious expression of our deep concern on the persecution of human rights defenders and political activists and the persecution of the opposition in Kazakhstan. And since Kazakhstan is the most affluent of the Central Asian countries, we expect that it would take very seriously the need to improve the situation dramatically so that the civil society, a civic space is free. This is, of course, a situation and issue of all the countries. So lastly, I'm very pleased to take note of the fact that Terhi Hakala, the ambassador from Finland, has now been appointed as special representative of the European Union to Central Asia. She knows the region deeply, and I cooperated with her when she was Director General in the Foreign Affairs Ministry in Helsinki for Russia, Eastern Europe, and Central Asia. So I think we have to cooperate a lot from all sides with her. So thank you very much. I'll be absent for a while, but I will join you back for the final remarks.
Thank you, MEP, and good luck for the TV interview. And I turn to helmut.scholz from the left.
Thank you, Philip, and welcome also from my side to all participants in this very important. I agree here with my colleagues who have coordinated this meeting event. I think it is really important to have it as a starting point, maybe even if we are not meeting the first time, and I see some well-known faces in our meeting today again, and I'm very satisfied about that. But we should really see it as a starting point in the preparation for the Civic Forum later on this year. So we should all together try our utmost to insist that all those who are today in the meeting are also able to participate in the Civic Forum. Second remark from my side is we are not speaking about human rights as a common slogan, or that is just a mode or just an understanding which we are addressing only in the bilateral relations with other countries, like, for example, with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, etc. No, I think it must be the constitutional understanding that citizens have to determine and have to participate in the decision-making of the development of their countries or the region. And therefore, I think we have also to avoid to put and set up double standards. So there must be a unified approach. What is true for the European Union, with all the plus and minus maybe, must be, of course, also the truth for the region, the Central Asian region. And I also welcome the Mongolian representatives, because I was in the last legislative period the rapporteur of the EU-Mongolia relationship in the committee. And now I'm in the International Trade Committee again, also responsible for that region. And that leads me to the question that the labor world, the labor conditions, the employment situation, the social questions, which are, I would say, very much the burning interest of people to have the chance to construct their perspectives, to take their life into their own hands, is just as important as the question of environment, as struggling for a perspective for all of us together. And that leads me to the final remark. Probably the region is very much marked by the developments in and around Afghanistan. So the question of peace, security, stabilization, the chance that people have the chance to strive for the future are, of course, linked also in the Central Asian region with the development in Afghanistan. So that we should take seriously also on board when we are discussing the question, what does it mean for the implementation of human rights, of human rights defenders against maybe some impact of religious circles, religious clubs who are interested in destabilizing, or that we have to understand what does it mean for the state authorities to give the citizens a say in determining the concrete reality of a society. So I'm looking very much with interest to today's exchange of views. I hope that we can get additional knowledge about additional knowledge about what is going on in the whole region, what is going on in Kazakhstan, and what we have to shape the bilateral relations between the European Union and the countries of the region in the political and the economic and the social and cultural relationship. Thank you very much, and hopefully we see each other soon in presence.
Thanks very much, MEP Scholz. And we will now turn to the region, to the 6 countries on which we have to discuss today. I mean, it's a really great list of human rights defenders and experts on human rights in the region. Many friends, many colleagues, and it's really want to congratulate the organizers of the event for having put us all together. The downside of this very packed agenda is that we will have to limit speaking times for each participant to 5 minutes only. So we'll try to be strict on that. Let's all be trying to stick to the speaking time allocated to us. We'll first turn to Kazakhstan, and I will give the floor to Yevgeny Zhovtis, the director of the Kazakhstan International Bureau for Human Rights and the Rule of Law. Yevgeny, it's a pleasure to have you and to see you, although only on video. And you now have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. I will speak English. That's those who are speaking English, please turn to the English that I will be speakable enough and clear enough. Уважаемые депутаты Европарламента, дамы и господа, проблемы развития демократии, верховенства права и соблюдения прав человека в Казахстане непосредственно связаны с внешнеполитическим и внутриполитическим контекстом и динамикой его развития. На внешнеполитическом уровне власти Казахстана сделали заявку на членство в Совете ООН по правам человека и направили в Генеральную Ассамблею ООН обещания по продвижению некоторых прав и свобод. Они создали новую должность специального представителя президента по международному сотрудничеству, который вместе с представителями Министерства иностранных дел активно разъясняет за рубежом политику Казахстана, в том числе в области прав человека. И Казахстан продолжает реализовывать амбиции в отношении членства в ФАТФ и в ОСР и других организациях. На внутриполитическом уровне президент Токаев и власти сделали ряд громких заявлений о некоторых политической либерализации, а в начале июня этого года был даже принят указ президента о мерах в области прав человека и план мероприятий правительства к нему. Разработан, обсуждается законопроект об общественном контроле, объявлено о разработке нового законодательства о некоммерческих организациях, увеличено количество и расширен формат разных диалоговых площадок, рабочих групп и советов. Власти продвигают концепцию слышащего государства, которая, как мне кажется, пока стала немного больше слушать, но с точки зрения результата не очень-то и слышит. Поэтому я остановлюсь на том, что вызывает тревогу. Прежде всего, это законодательство, особенно так называемое антиэкстремистское и антитеррористическое, которое затрагивает свободу выражения мнения, мирных собраний, религии или убеждений, объединения, передвижения, и которое зачастую репрессивно и дискриминационно по отношению к гражданскому обществу. Объявлено о присоединении Казахстана к факультативному протоколу, направленному на отмену смертной казни к Международному пакту о гражданских и политических правах. Шаг позитивный, однако смертная казнь продолжает сохраняться в Конституции, сделана оговорка о военных преступлениях и террористических преступлениях, и пока она не исключена из Уголовного кодекса. Объявлено о снижении численности членов политической партии для ее регистрации, введена 30% квота для женщин и молодежи при выборах в парламент и создание правовой основы для парламентской ассамблеи. Оппозиции. Однако снижение численности членов политической партии с 40 до 20 тысяч в авторитарном государстве в стране с 19 миллионами населения ничего не меняет, и ни одна оппозиционная партия не была зарегистрирована за последние 10 лет. Более того, в соответствии с внесенными изменениями в выбранными законодательства, выборы проходят исключительно по пропорциональной системе, то есть по партийным спискам. В результате политическая оппозиция вообще не представлена ни в парламенте, ни в местных органах власти. Сами по себе квоты или нормы ничего не значат, если невозможно зарегистрировать оппозиционную партию, вести агитацию и участвовать в выборах. Выборы 10 января этого года, их оценка миссии ОБСЕ, это хорошо подтверждает. Как член экспертного совета казахстанских правозащитных организаций по составлению списка политзаключенных, хочу отметить, что в течение последних нескольких месяцев этот список растет. Мы стали почти каждый месяц принимать решение о его расширении. Идет давление на мирное протестное движение, и каждую неделю практически проходят политические процессы. Мы сталкиваемся с масштабным давлением на тех гражданских активистов, которые освобождаются из мест лишения свободы по окончании срока в связи с освобождением, или тех, кто был осужден к наказанию, не связанному с лишением свободы. Все осужденные практически гражданские активисты лишаются права заниматься общественной деятельностью. То есть их лишают целого ряда гражданских прав и свобод. Нельзя организовывать митинги, участвовать в них, нельзя участвовать в деятельности общественных объединений, нельзя участвовать в семинарах, тренингах, круглых столах, конференциях, нельзя даже распространять информацию в соцсетях, держать блоги. Они автоматически включаются в так называемый перечень лиц, финансирующих терроризм и экстремизм, хотя никаких доказательств такого финансирования в отношении активистов нет. Их счета заблокированы, они не могут получать больше суммы в размере менее $100 на члена семьи, они не могут открывать бизнес, не могут оформлять в государственных органах или у нотариусов документов. Эти ограничения накладываются до погашения судимости. Это целый набор таких моментов, которые вызывают серьезную озабоченность, не говоря уже о том, что новый закон о мирных собраниях ни к чему не привел. Продолжается практика задержаний мирно протестующих, практика кетлинга и так далее, и так далее, и так далее. Я закончу следующим, я готов буду ответить на любые вопросы, но у Европейского Союза есть стратегия в отношении Центральной Азии. Есть соглашение о расширенном партнерстве с Казахстаном. Есть диалог по правам человека и есть резолюция парламента от 11 февраля. И есть двусторонние соглашения государств-участников ЕС с нашей страной. С нашей точки зрения, эти инструменты могут более эффективно применяться, чтобы, с одной стороны, внимательно следить за тем, как Республика Казахстан выполняет свои обязательства в области прав человека и реформирует свое законодательство, а с другой – срочно требовать прекращения политических репрессий, прекращения преследования мирных гражданских активистов и освобождения тех, кто находится в местах лишения свободы. Это кратко, что я хотел сказать. Готов буду ответить на все вопросы. Спасибо за внимание.
Thanks a lot, Yevgeny, for sticking to the time allocated. Just a reminder that interpretation in Russian and English is indeed available on the Zoom discussion. I think you have the link on Facebook on the comment section if you want to join and benefit from interpretation. I'm moving to the second speaker on Kazakhstan, Tatiana Chernobil, who is an independent human rights lawyer. Tatiana, I think you are, I don't see you, but I think you're online and you have the floor.
I am.
Yes, hello.
Hello, everyone, and thank you all for organizing this always timely discussion. I will stop at some examples of recent restrictions on human rights defenders in Kazakhstan. Human rights defenders in Kazakhstan are in general treated by the government with caution and suspicion. Hence, the government's tactics have been to take them under state control. Take, for instance, independent election monitoring. In December last year, last December, a month before the parliamentary elections day, the Central Election Commission issued a decree overruling basically the law on elections by saying that from then on, independent observers from civil society organizations should since then on have a documented proof of that their respective organizations have election monitoring as a specific activity permitted under their registered charters. The observers had to have printed copies of their NGO's charters with them to show at the polling stations. Also, that decree of the Central Election Commission, in violation of the law on elections, was banning photo taking and video recording by independent observers and going live on social media. When 2 days before the elections, independent observers from the Youth Information Service of Kazakhstan NGO posted copies of their negative PCR tests on social media. Paper proof of negative PCR tests was another demand for independent observers, and independent here is a keyword. The government, a day before the elections, came out with the news release declaring that that exact laboratory is unreliable, which took the laboratory by great surprise. Fortunately, the observers were anyway able to use their tests from that laboratory all right. During the elections, by the words of Irina Mednikova, a long-time independent observer in Kazakhstan, it has been unprecedented that in every second case, by their NGO assessment, their observers reported violations of the law regulating independent observation and even attacks on observers themselves. This conclusion was also supported by Wings of Liberty NGO, a human rights NGO from Astana. After the elections, the Wings of Liberty tried to challenge the restrictions placed on them by the ruling of the Central Election Commission with courts, 4 times with the Supreme Court and 1 at the City District Court in Astana, but all in vain. They now are preparing a submission to the UN Human Rights Committee. At the same time, according to these two NGOs, with the experience of election monitoring for many years, there have been no known cases of complaints whatsoever from the observers from pro-state NGOs. After the elections, to avoid the problem in the future, the Wings of Liberty NGO decided to amend their charter for it to clearly now say that in addition to just human rights monitoring, the line that they had in their charter, they will do monitoring of the elections. As a rule, registration of charters would take 10 days or so. With the Wings of Liberty, it was 2 months. The Ministry of Justice registering body would not register their charter until the line on election monitoring conformed with their demand. What is it as not state censorship and restrictions on the freedom of association? Now, the government, as Evgeny mentioned, is drafting a separate law on public oversight. Why do we have to have is not clear to me or to any human rights defenders here, as we already have laws specifying public monitoring, such as the law on NPM, law on access to information, and others. To me, it rather looks like a law for the government to oversee public overseers. Such laws, by the way, exist only in Russia and Azerbaijan. Briefly on the right of peaceful assemblies, for the breach of the law to notify city authorities of the intent to hold an assembly, peaceful, non-violent protesters are now, and this is a new tactic of Kazakhstani police, kettled in. As recent as July the 6th, a couple of dozens of peaceful protesters were kettled by police in Almaty. The protesters were supporters and members of the Unregistered Democratic Party of Kazakhstan. And on July the 6th, the capital city day in Kazakhstan, they were opposing the expansion of Chinese business in Kazakhstan and were protesting against the personality cult of the former president of Kazakhstan, Nazarbayev, whose birthday was chosen for the capital city day. Many previous attempts by these and other political movements in Kazakhstan to hold a rally during the past year were met with the same response, police kettling. And I am finishing. The practice of kettling by police of peaceful protesters should only be used as a very last resort and in strict compliance with the national legislation and international norms. I would suggest to the dignified members of the European Parliament and the international community in general, in your communications with Kazakhstani officials and in your respective statements, to underline the freedom of association of human rights defenders, the need for their protection and the laissez-faire approach, rather than practicing this controlling approach. Human rights defenders are the ones who must be trusted and reckoned with when it comes to sustaining democratic values. Thank you,
Tatiana. Thanks a lot. And moving on to a second country in our list, we're moving to Tajikistan, and I think Dilrabo Samadova, chairperson of the Association of Young Lawyers, could join us. Dilrabo, yes, I can see you, so you have the floor.
Thank you very much. С вашего разрешения буду говорить на русском. Большое спасибо за организацию такого мероприятия, за ваше время и готовность услышать наши голоса. На самом деле, из-за того, что мы находимся в такой изоляции, такое ощущение, что мы потеряли контакты с друг другом, мы не видимся. И вот это вот мероприятие еще одно напоминание о том, что мы должны быть в солидарности и знать ситуацию друг о друге. Я коротко скажу о ситуации, связанной с последними 1,5 годами. С того момента, как у нас объявили распространение коронавируса, очень сильное распространение домашнего насилия, бытового насилия в Таджикистане, очень много случаев сексуального насилия над детьми. Это есть, к сожалению, во многих странах, но ситуация у нас вызывает наше волнение тем, что на самом деле государственные органы не знают, как реагировать. Мы выявили, что наше законодательство не готово проводить тщательное расследование случаев сексуального насилия над детьми. Есть необходимая нужда, острая нужда в том, чтобы улучшить законодательство, защитить жертв, семью жертвы. К сожалению, из-за того, что государство работает в таком карантинном режиме, очень сложно делать адвокацию на национальном уровне, поэтому я хотела бы попросить обратить внимание на эти случаи. У нас после того, как был объявлен коронавирус и были распространены очень много информации, они были распространены потому, что государство не признавало, государство не давало нормальной статистики. У нас есть два параллельных статистики государственные, в том числе независимая статистика о случаях смерти. И тогда государства приняли ограничительное законодательство, так называемую борьба с фейками, с недостоверной информацией, что на самом деле очень сильно ограничило доступ к информации, в том числе доступ к гуманитарной помощи, которую получает государство, нет мониторинга всей этой помощи, которую мы получаем. И очень мало информации журналисты публикуют, в том числе о ситуации с коронавирусом, потому что так называемая недостоверная информация, которая непонятно, что имеется в виду, за это могут привлечь к реальному сроку уголовной ответственности. Больше года нет нормального доступа в места лишения ограничения свободы, в том числе адвокаты сталкиваются с очень большими сложностями, родственники, необходимо получать очень много разрешений неформальных, сдавать тесты о том, что у человека нет коронавируса. Это на самом деле сильно распространяет пытки, мало доступа к правовой помощи у лиц, которые содержатся в таких местах лишения ограничения свободы, и нет доступа адвокатов к своим клиентам. Идет сильное давление на НПО журналистов, адвокатов. Это также связано с тем, что нет возможности выезда из страны, не работают программы релокации, поэтому и есть жесткая самоцензура, потому что знаешь, что если что, ты остаешься в этой стране и уехать невозможно. Есть случаи задержания и уголовного преследования адвокатов Абдулмаджида Ризоева. Об этом сейчас часто пишут в средствах массовой информации. Он защищал лиц, дома которых сносили со стороны коммерческой организации. Против него возбудили уголовное дело, обвиняют его в экстремизме и терроризме. Есть случаи, когда практикующий адвокат, партнер коалиции против пыток, одно из самых сильных объединений по правам человека, подвергся тоже давлению, он покинул страну. Есть серьезное ограничение передвижения. Мигранты, семьи трудовых мигрантов не могут выехать. Это сильно распространяет коррупцию в стране, нет доступа к медицинскому образованию, который стоит очень дорого, нужно еще и платить дополнительные взятки для того, чтобы получить, и билеты ограничиваются, контролируются со стороны государственных органов на выезд. На эти НПО, которые продолжают активно работать, оказывать правовую помощь, говорить о случаях нарушения прав человека, мониторингом занимаются, они подвергаются дополнительному давлению. Сейчас активизировался комитет по инвестициям, который проверяет организации, обвиняет их в том, государство и очень большие штрафы, хотя в соответствии с налоговым кодексом гранты — это не инвестиции, мы не обязаны предоставлять в суде, и если на самом деле суд примет сторону государства, это большая вероятность, потому что адвокатам вообще не дают защищать организацию, не принимают их запросы, тогда эта волна может коснуться всех НПО, и буквально всех будут привлекать к ответственности и на этой почве давить. Спасибо. Если будут вопросы, я готова буду ответить.
Thanks a lot, Dean Rabo. And I move to Muhamadjon Kabirov, the president of the board of the Foundation for Intercultural Integration. Muhamadjon, you have the floor.
Hello, Philippe. Thank you very much for giving the floor. Dear member of the European Parliament, distinguished speakers and participants. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to organizer of this important meeting for inviting me, and also I think 5 minutes is not enough to express the ongoing violation of human rights in Tajikistan, but I will try to point out the most important and latest development of the crackdown on civil society activists and lawyers and journalists in Tajikistan. Thanks to Dilrabo, she made my work easy. She covered part of the problems. I will start with domestic problem, as she mentioned. Recently, the UN reported that only 6% of the women who have faced domestic violence report to the police. Only 6% from the 100% of the women who face domestic violence are just reporting to the police. The main reason why the women do not complain is they do not trust corrupted law enforcement agencies and the fear of their husbands. And then I move to religious freedom. The situation with the religious freedom in Tajikistan is highly concerning. Although the Tajikistan is a secular state, all religious affairs are controlled by the government or religious affairs committee. This committee even write Friday ceremonies for all the mosques in country. Women are not allowed to enter mosques in Tajikistan, and they cannot enter the state universities and offices wearing a headscarf. Also, young people under the age of 18 are not allowed to attend mosque, and their parents are forbidden to teach them religion at home. Since 2016, Tajikistan has been designated a country of particular concern under the International Religious Freedom Act in the United States for having engaged in or tolerated particular severe violation of the religious freedom. But the situation, unfortunately, until today are not improved. Two imam was recently imprisoned just for quoting a poem at the ceremony. And then I move to crackdown on media and lawyers. As Dilrabon mentioned, 2 lawyers this year was arrested. Said Nuruddin Shamsidinov was arrested in January and sentenced to 8.5 years. And another lawyer, Rizoev Abdulmajid, was sentenced to 6.5 years in prison just for quoting poem in Tajikistan. The situation with the freedom of expression and journalists not very different from the segment of the society. And as we are aware, Daler Sharipov also was arrested, the independent journalist, just quoting quotation from some scholar in his book. He was imprisoned for 1 year. Restriction on radio liberty of Tajikistan, and also crackdown on persecution the journalists relative inside Tajikistan, especially I'm as a journalist also, our colleagues, relatives are persecuted in Tajikistan, to pressure on journalists to quit their activities abroad. And also there is no independent media left in Tajikistan, and all media controlled by the state. Exiled outlets are blocked in Tajikistan and have no access. And then I move to transnational repression. To persecute dissidents outside the country, the Tajik authority have worked together with the law enforcement agencies from the other countries such as Russia, Turkey, Ukraine, Belarus, using political motivated requests to Interpol and detaining, extraditing and even kidnapping citizens. This year, Izzat Amonov, well-known immigrant defender in Russia, he was illegally extradited from Russia to Tajikistan. By the way, he was a citizen of the Russia. He was his passport was illegally removed, and he appeared in Tajikistan. And this is not the one incident. More than 20 activists from Russia have been kidnapped to Tajikistan. And I just go to the political situation, if I have time.
You don't really have time. If you could maybe try to conclude.
Okay, so after the crackdown in 2015, the situation on opposition, crackdown on opposition is ongoing after the arrest of leader of IOPT and the Group 24. And this year we faced it. Before that, Zay Saidov, leader of the New Tajikistan, was arrested, and this year we faced it. We saw that Mahmurod Odinayev, deputy leader of the Social Democratic Party, was also arrested just for asking permission to organize a demonstration in Tajikistan. I have some recommendation. I don't think I have to do this, or I have to wait in the end.
Maybe you could bring them during the Q&A section. We could maybe try to come back on that, if you don't mind, so that we can stick to the agenda.
So thank you very much. But just imagine that when president is running country for 28 years and his son is head of the government, his daughter is head of the office of president, and his son is mayor of the capital, and his son-in-law is deputy of the national Bank of Tajikistan. So the whole family running the country. So you forget about election and political parties. So I won't even point out to the political parties and election situation. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Muhamadjon, and thanks to you and Dilrabo for having brought the issue of domestic violence, which, as we also documented, it is a problem throughout Central Asia and should be really taken into account. Moving on to a third country in the region, Uzbekistan. Unfortunately, one of the speakers finally cannot make it, but I will give the floor to Agzam Turgunov, opposition activist and chair of the human rights organization called Mazlum. Agzam, we're really glad to have you here, and you have the floor.
Спасибо всем организаторам. Добрый день всем. Я очень рад, уважаемые господа депутаты Европарламента, уважаемые коллеги. Я благодарен вам за возможность выступить перед вами и возможность поблагодарить за усилия Европарламента в моем освобождении. С 2000 года я занимаюсь правозащитной деятельностью в условиях тотального контроля и ощущения постоянного риска безопасности, исходящего от узбекских спецслужб. Мне довелось отбывать наказание в каримовских застенках трижды. Последний раз мне было назначено 10 лет лишения свободы. Некоторое время я отбывал наказание и в колонии Джаслых-Каракалпаки, которую в свое время рекомендовал закрыть спецдокладчик по вопросам пыток Тео Ван Бовен еще в 2003 году. Узбекские власти объявили, что закрыли эту колонию, где условия содержания заключенных можно сравнить только с пытками. Однако, насколько это достоверно, правозащитникам неизвестно. Власти Узбекистана всегда много обещают, но чаще всего это остается только обещание. Особенно хочу подчеркнуть и обратить ваше внимание на ниже следующее. Практика пыток в Узбекистане еще продолжается. Зарегистрировать независимую правозащитную организацию невозможно. Это я по себе знаю. Добиться реабилитации бывшим политзаключенным тоже невозможно. Положение заключенных критическое, особенно в период COVID-19. Они умирают, их пытают и подвергают рабству. Доступ к достоверной информации в стране до сих пор отсутствует. И тем не менее, я верил и верю в позитивные изменения в Узбекистане и хочу сделать все возможное, чтобы официальную регистрацию правозащитной организации Дом прав человека. Это важно, потому что правозащитник должен влиять на развитие правовых реформ, если будет активно использовать национальные правовые средства защиты и сотрудничать с международными партнерами. В октябре 2017 года я вышел на свободу и сразу же начал готовить документы на регистрацию независимой правозащитной организации, основное направление которой будет оказание правовой помощи незаконно осужденным. И в первую очередь важно начать с тех, кто долгие годы был в списке политзаключенных Европарламента в рамках резолюции 2009 и 2014 годов. Для меня знаковым моментом станет то, если в Узбекистане будет посмертно реабилитирован бывший депутат парламента Узбекистана Мурат Джураев. Светлая ему память. Он 21 год, 5 сроков подряд был в заключении. Даже после его смерти члены его семьи подвергаются дискриминации. Пока в Узбекистане не изменилось отношение к этому достойному человеку и другим политическим заключенным, доверять реформам я не могу. С 2018 года по настоящее время я сделал 7 попыток зарегистрировать правозащитную организацию и уже подаю 8-й раз, пока мою просьбу отклоняют, потому что я сохраняю независимость. Это происходит в течение 4 лет. Это говорит о том, что в политике президента Узбекистана не произошли позитивные изменения в области права человека. Тем более при подготовке и составлении устава и других документов Мне помогли мои европейские коллеги и опытный юрист из Узбекистана Сергей Майоров. Я был и остаюсь в черном списке спецслужб, потому что осужден по особо тяжкой статье на основании ложного обвинения. Я хочу реальных позитивных перемен в Узбекистане, и без поддержки Евросоюза вряд ли это случится. Поэтому в очередной раз прошу, поддержите нас, правозащитников. И, на мой взгляд, пора принимать новые резолюции Европарламента по Узбекистану, отмечая самые болевые вопросы в области прав человека. В некоторых областях, я хочу еще раз подчеркнуть, идет произвольные аресты, задержания, как это случается со сносами и с блогерами. Спасибо за внимание. У меня все.
Thanks a lot, Agzam, for your presentation and for your very important testimony. Unless I think I think I understand that Umida Niyazova from the Uzbek Forum for Human Rights could not join us at the end of the day. Let me know if I'm wrong, but since that's the case, I will move now to the case of Kyrgyzstan. And again, we have two speakers on Kyrgyzstan, and I will start with Tolekan Ismailova from Birdwino, Kyrgyzstan. Tolekan, you have the floor.
Добрый день. Спасибо, Филипп. Спасибо, депутаты Европарламента, уважаемые коллеги. Мы встречаемся в очень трагичное, кризисное время для Центральной Азии, не только для региона, но и для всего мира. Почему? Потому что внутренние кризисы, как политическая коррупция, как безнаказанность, которую я хочу отметить. Почему? Потому что мир прекрасно знает о тех системных кризисах, до пандемии в странах Центральной Азии, масштабы преследования активистов, профсоюзных лидеров, правозащитников и безнаказанность властей. Мы знаете, что события в Джаназене, Казахстан, шахтеры, профсоюзные лидеры, их семьи, некоторые были убиты, преследованы, и власть осталась безнаказанной. Вы знаете андижанские события, когда мирные люди погибли, и очень много беженцев пострадали и страдают до сих пор, и остались безнаказанными эти кейсы. Вы знаете, что исчезновение политических лидеров и активистов в Туркменистане в 2000 году до сих пор цель кампании «Покажите их живыми», раскрыть судьбы десятков сотен людей, пропавших без вести в этих песчаных туркменских тюрьмах в результате массовых репрессий, до сих пор не знает мир. Поэтому мир наблюдает о фактах военной агрессии со стороны Таджикистана, приграничных районов Баткенской области и гибели мирных граждан, включая детей, девочки 12 лет. И вы знаете, что все эти страны члены ОДКБ, и вы знаете, кто игрок в этой игре. Я не хочу говорить о людях. Почему? Потому что Центральная Азия – это многонациональный регион. И здесь речь не идет о таджиках и кыргызах, речь идет о наркотрафике, о разделении тех ресурсов, которыми пользовались высокие государственные лидеры, начиная от России, заканчивая Афганистаном. Поэтому, вы знаете, кейс я благодарю госпожу Хайди, которая участвовала в просмотре фильма, посвященному правозащитнику Азимжану Аскарову, который погиб 25 июля в прошлом году в тюрьме без доступа к альтернативной медицинской помощи, хотя мы с ним боролись и с семьей, и с нашими коллегами, и спасибо международному сообществу в течение 10 лет. И до сегодняшнего дня судебная система коррумпирована, она избирательна, она служит только для власти, не для этнических меньшинств, которые пострадали, и жертв 2010 года. Мы еще ждем справедливости. И вот здесь я хотела бы сказать, что важны усилия для правозащитных организаций, и мы нуждаемся в вашей помощи, уважаемые депутаты Европарламента. Почему? Потому что нам надо работать с Международным уголовным судом. Некоторые страны ратифицировали, некоторые еще не ратифицировали. Поэтому, чтобы бороться с безнаказанностью, нам надо сделать очень хорошие кампании, чтобы регион чувствовал вот этот процесс, что кто-либо, который захватывает власть, все равно предстанет перед независимым судом. И, конечно, мы должны бороться, чтобы соображения Комитета ООН по правам человека в отношении жертв пыток, включая, значит, усиление реформ сектора безопасности с гендерным подходом и развитие парламентского контроля, гражданского контроля, да, должны быть усилены, они должны быть ключевыми как в программах GSP+, так и в претворении, значит, всех тех международных обязательств, потому что климатические условия радикальные и внешние вызовы, как Афганистан, они диктуют, чтобы мы придерживались универсальности прав и свобод человека. Почему? Потому что сегодня мы постоянно разговариваем с женщинами-правозащитницами Афганистана, которые нуждаются в нашей помощи. Они хотят через Кыргызстан, Казахстан найти убежище в третьи страны. Я думаю, в этом вопросе мы тоже должны быть едины, помочь людям бежать от войны и найти безопасное место. И, конечно, коллеги говорили о том, что среда для неправительственных организаций, она сужается. И Кыргызстан, который славился тем, что закон об НПО, начиная с 1998 года, которым были авторы, и мы очень гордились, 17 июня этого года парламент принял. И мы считаем, что это нарушает как Конституцию, так и права политических гражданских граждан. И мы сейчас работаем над привлечением парламентариев, которые инициировали такой ужасный закон, да, как в России, и мы будем судиться и отстаивать, значит, право граждан на свободу ассоциации. Я думаю, в этом тоже мы должны быть единомышленниками и должны помочь, чтобы все-таки GSP+, и новые стратегии партнерства Центральной Азии, Евросоюза были успешны. Почему? Потому что сектор безопасности, он как никто другой, он должен быть реформирован. Почему? Потому что в Кыргызстане, начиная с независимости, он остается пока таким вот красным, советским, который не уважает достоинство человека. И вот мои коллеги говорили, что пытки, они остаются масштабными. И, конечно, для того, чтобы работать с социальным НПО, нам нужно партнерство. И я думаю, что для достижения цели СУР 2030 мы должны говорить о хорошем управлении. Я поздравляю вас, депутатов парламента. Почему? Потому что сегодня партия зеленых, социал-демократов сегодня внедрили, и идет процесс принятия этического кодекса не только для стран. Это показатель, что Европарламент будет расширять принципы добросовестного управления. Последнее, я хотела бы сказать, что межсекторальное кризисное реагирование – это новый инструмент. И как уже госпожа Хайди говорила об институтах омбудсмана, мы должны усиливать национальные правозащитные институты, чтобы они соответствовали парижским принципам, чтобы они стали независимыми. И последнее, дом для женщин стал, как уже Гильярова говорила, очень опасным. Поэтому вот эта вот адаптация программ, она должна быть очень с учетом изменения климата и женщины и IT-технологии. Почему? Потому что мы нуждаемся в новом образовании, чтобы мы могли горизонтально работать. Благодарю вас. Спасибо.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Tolekan, for your presentation and for having reminded the event on Muhamadjon Kabirov, which took place with the participation of some MEPs, including Madam Heidihautal just a few weeks ago. Moving on to the next speaker on Kyrgyzstan, I will ask Aziza Abdirasulova from the human rights organization Kilim Shami to make her presentation. You have 5 minutes. Aziza, can you hear us? It seems we cannot hear you, and I'm not sure if I think you are connected.
Филипп, я говорила с Азизой несколько раз, она никак не может присоединиться. Что-то там проблемы с техникой, что ли.
Okay. Okay, so great. Okay, thanks for the update. And maybe we'll come back to Aziza a little bit later. We'll be in touch with the organizers to see how she can contribute to this event. I will move to the case of Turkmenistan now, which is indeed a very difficult case, including for us NGOs, as access is extremely limited, to say the least, or impossible. And I will ask to Farid Turbatulin who is a Turkmen human rights and environmental activist working out of Austria, where he is in exile, to take the floor. Farid, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Здравствуйте, я приветствую всех своих коллег, друзей и благодарю организаторов за эту возможность. Мы с друзьями не виделись уже много волн, наверное, можно так сказать. И я сейчас просто приступлю сразу к делу, чтобы сократить время. В Туркменистане действительно очень тяжелая ситуация, даже без учета ситуации с COVID-19, наличие которой, конечно, власти не признают до сих пор. Случались природные катаклизмы в виде маловодья, это катастрофично для орошаемого земледелия, то есть страна близка к гуманитарной катастрофе. Сохраняющийся со времен Советского Союза командно-административный метод управления, он еще более усугубился повальной коррупцией, все это ведет к кризису экономики и социальной сферы. Правительство решает такие важные проблемы, как обеспечить население мукой, растительным маслом, яйцами. То есть даже это они не могут организовать. У магазинов выстраиваются огромные очереди за этими продуктами, возникают драки. На мой взгляд, главная причина этого игнорирование властями собственной конституции, пренебрежение к правам и свободам граждан, отсутствие обратной связи с населением. Вот этот нюанс, мне кажется, очень важен, потому что за 30 лет репрессивного режима, который существует в нашей стране, не возникла культуры собраний, мирных собраний, нет независимых СМИ, уничтожены зачатки гражданского общества. И в данном случае единственным инструментом воздействия, хоть какого-то воздействия на власти, конечно, остается Европарламент, который я очень благодарю за активное участие в этом, ООН, другие международные структуры. У нас только остается возможность апеллировать к ним с просьбой обратить внимание на проблемы, которые существуют в нашей стране. К сожалению, далеко не все рекомендации международных организаций туркменская сторона выполняет, не на все обращения они реагируют. Иногда достаточно демонстративно они нарушают собственные законы. Например, в апреле этого года президент Туркменистана, глава исполнительной власти, вдруг стал руководителем Верхней палаты парламента, хотя он в выборах не участвовал. То есть это как бы, наверное, такой достаточно демонстративный шаг их отношения к собственным законам. Поэтому, конечно, там проблемы такие, что в Туркменистане нет возможности мирных протестов, мирных демонстраций. Сейчас все это переносится за рубеж, где этим активно занимаются туркменские трудовые мигранты и студенты, или блогеры, которые ведут свои независимые блоги. Но проблема в том, что против этих людей, точнее против их родственников, которые остаются в Туркменистане, развернуты репрессии. Очень много ни в чем не повинных людей оказываются в тюрьмах или их увольняют с работы. Все это, конечно, попытки, чтобы зарубежные активисты туркменские замолчали. Пока это не сильно удается, но тем не менее люди подвергаются репрессиям. И я бы хотел обратиться к госпожам депутатам Европарламента, чтобы по возможности они этот нюанс тоже учитывали. То есть когда страдают не те, которые, по мнению власти, виноваты, а их родственники и близкие. Спасибо за внимание. Еще раз спасибо за организацию.
Thanks a lot, Farid. And I will move to the second speaker on Turkmenistan, Ruslan Niatiev from Turkmen News. Ruslan, up to you.
Thank you very much. I would like to wrap my presentation around one key issue, the lack of rule of law in Turkmenistan. Because of it, we have independent reporters in prisons in Turkmenistan. Mr. Nurgildi Khalikov, a young man from Ashgabat, got a 4-year prison term last year for sharing a photo of the World Health Organization delegation that visited the country to study COVID preparedness of Turkmenistan. 4 years in prison on fabricated charges of fraud. Reporters Without Borders, Committee to Protect Journalists, Justice for Media Foundation, the OSCE, various UN special rapporteurs and working groups, they all raised concern about his fate and demanded his release in vain. By the way, there is COVID in Turkmenistan and people get contaminated and die, including foreign diplomats. For example, the UK ambassador to Turkmenistan had to leave to his homeland to get proper treatment. The advisor on religious affairs at the Turkish embassy had died of it last year. Because of absence of rule of law, we have human rights defenders in prisons in Turkmenistan. Mansur Mingilov got a 22-year sentence in 2012 for documenting numerous cases of human rights violations against the Baloch minority in Turkmenistan. He was arrested and accused of severe criminal charges, including drug smuggling, right after leaving the US embassy premises in Ashgabat, where he shared documental evidence of abuses and torture against the Baloch minority. In prison, he held hunger strike for over 2 weeks protesting his sentence. He is still in custody. Mrs. Khursanay Ismatullaeva, a doctor in Turkmenistan, was sacked because she refused to take illegal money from her patients or send them to additional paid checkups to meet the so-called money plan of the hospital where she worked. Today, a doctor with decades of experience is jobless. No medical institution wants to employ her with this black mark. Funny, but the trade union officials rendered a decision taking her side, but the court found no violation of the labor code and the ombudswoman refused to help her. There is no rule of law in Turkmenistan. Last but surely not least, every fall, tens of thousands of public sector workers in Turkmenistan are forced to pick cotton. They do so under the threat of losing their jobs. Today, the whole world is focused on forced labor in China's Xinjiang region, but in Turkmenistan, the situation is almost the same. The only difference is that the Turkmen public sector workers are not taken to the cotton fields handcuffed. Yet hundreds of tons of Turkmen forced labor cotton make their way to Europe. According to UN Comtrade database, in 2019 alone, Portugal imported raw Turkmen cotton worth $2.5 million. Italy, almost 2 million, Poland and Lithuania combined, almost $2 million. And even more textiles made of Turkmen forced labor cotton make their way to Europe. Please close the EU doors for Turkmen forced labor cotton. Several years ago, the United States banned all Turkmen cotton and textiles made of it precisely because of the forced labor issue. Please follow their example. Going back to the absence of rule of please demand the immediate release of Turkmen activists Nurgeldi Khalikov and Mansur Mingilov, who were unlawfully imprisoned. Please send letters to the president of Turkmenistan like US senators do and urge your counterparts at the European Parliament to do so to demand their release. Finally, the Turkmen regime understands only the language of sanctions. Don't give money to the Turkmen government to improve its judiciary or the legal system. This doesn't help. On the contrary, EU's financial support and capacity building programs in Turkmenistan legitimize the current regime. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ruslan. Also, thanks for these very clear conclusions and recommendations. Since I'll just go back to check if Aziza is back online. Otherwise, we'll move to the next round of presenters. Aziza? She doesn't seem to be online. Well, I'll just briefly use my privilege as moderator to flag that the death of human rights defenders Azimjan Askarov in detention in Kyrgyzstan took place almost 1 year ago. It would be 1 year on the 25th of July. And I think it would be an important signal for all human rights defenders in Kyrgyzstan, but also in Central Asia, if members of the European Parliament could speak up via statements publicly on the 25th of July this year, again, to call for accountability, to call for rehabilitation, and to call for compensations for his beloved ones and his family. I think it's important not only for Azimjan's case, 1 year after his tragic death in detention, but for any human rights worker and activist in Central Asia. It would be great to have the voice of the 5 MEPs convening this event, but also of the DRA committee. Moving to, well, a little bit further away from Central Asia, but to Mongolia now, a country which I do not follow as part of my portfolio at Human Rights Watch. I would like to ask Ishinorov Manja from the Human Rights Development Vision Institute to take the floor for a 5 minutes presentation. Ishinorov, you have the floor. If you're connected.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
You are.
Thank you. Your Excellencies, distinguished members of the European Parliament, Your Excellencies, EU ambassadors, and my dear fellow human rights defenders, I'm privileged to represent Mongolia on this timely, crucial event, and thank you for members of the European Parliament for organizing this timely event. I'm a human rights attorney who played an instrumental role for social change in Mongolia's transition from communism to democracy. I use the method that is called strategic human rights and public interest litigation and advocacy, also known as an impact litigation, using the courts as a tool for strengthening the protection of human rights, educating the public about human rights, and exposing systematic and widespread violations of human rights. I will start with a positive message by saluting and congratulating the Mongolian Parliament adopting the law on the legal status of human rights defenders on April 2nd, 2021. This is a significant and progressive step towards full protection of the vital work of human rights defenders. Human rights defenders in Mongolia, while we are living in a relatively safe environment, we still have faced numerous obstacles such as pressure, stigmatization, and hate speech on social media. And we also lack resources and financial and other support from the government. COVID-19 has profoundly affected the entire spectrum of human rights in Mongolia, from the right to life, an adequate standard of living, social protection, work and employment, education, to protection from gender-based violence. It has exacerbated inequalities, poverty, food insecurity, discrimination, and other human rights failures, with disproportionate impact on those most marginalized. The spread of the virus exacerbated pre-existing issues such as overburdening the healthcare system and bringing poverty and hunger back on the rise. The lockdowns and COVID-19 prevention measures are having impact with far-reaching consequences on the most fundamental rights and freedoms of the people in Mongolia, including thousands of people who lost their jobs and income, and SMEs are closing down. In particularly hit hard informal workers and their families, who also less benefited from the government support. Domestic violence is another issue. Violence against women and children in general is a major social problem in Mongolia. Many research and survey findings reveal that 1 in 3 families in Mongolia suffer domestic violence. And recent research conducted by UNFPA and National Statistics Committee of Mongolia suggests that 1 in 2 women in Mongolia experienced some form of violence against women. Domestic violence against women and children has risen dramatically, significantly during the COVID period, as the victims had to suffer in lockdown with their abusers at home. 50% increase of domestic violence calls during this COVID period. Children's rights have been significantly affected during this time. Schools and other education facilities were closed. The government offered remote classes through television programs, but access to education for children returning to remote areas in countryside from urban facilities was difficult because of poor internet connectivity or television network coverage. For many children who depended on school meals as a main source of nutrition, school closures affected access to adequate food and placed their health at high risk. So I can go on and say so many things, but finally, I cannot avoid making a strong linkage between corruption and increasing of poverty and its effect on overall health and well-being of human rights and dignities of the people. I can highlight only a couple of examples from thousands of examples of this strong link of corruption and poverty. The road from Ubi to Tarkhan one of the biggest metropolitan city of Mongolia. The road work, $2.6 million fund was stolen from the project investment. So during this time, because of the unfixed road, 500 people died and more than 1,000 people were seriously injured from the accidents. And international donor assistance funds totaling $849 million is vanished during the first year of COVID, leaving the country unprepared without any resources to deal with peak season of COVID that hit very hard this year.
Nora,
I would like to call
propose you to
EU.
conclude.
Yeah, I will conclude. One sentence left.
Yes.
I ask EU for support and communication to end with Mongolia leaders to help make human rights better and use preventative measures to control abuse of corruption. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, and for your understanding as well. And I will move to the second speaker on Mongolia, Bolor Shaikhan Badam Shambu. I hope I pronounce your name correctly. You're a human rights defender, and you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the floor that giving rise up and the volume up our issues at the national level. And first of all, I would like to express my gratitude to the distinguished members, guests, and colleagues in the same field, and it is my honor to engage in this event. And in terms of the national human rights system, in terms of the national human rights system, I would like to highlight the National Human Rights Commission, whether it is complied with the Paris Principle. So following the adoption of the law on legal status of human rights defenders, which is a progressive legislative measure by the Parliament, the National Human Rights Commission shall have 2 new mandates based on recent legislative regulations. First one is a National Preventive Mechanism Against Torture, and second one is already mentioned mechanism concerning on the protection of human rights defenders, which is called Committee on Protection of Human Rights Defenders under National Human Rights Commission. However, during the Parliament discussion about the 2022 annual budgeting has shown that the National Human Rights Commission may not have adequate funding to ensure human, financial, and technical resources. For instance, during the Parliament discussion, some members already expressed that salaries for the public servants at the National Human Rights Commission and new mechanisms and necessary equipment for mechanisms were advised to reduce because of the COVID pandemic situation at the national level. And echoing the Ms. Nora's human rights issues affecting to not only human rights status as well as social values and the coherence and cohesion of the society, we also highlighting how the corruption and kinship affects to the rule of law and meritocracy. For instance, according to the Transparency International Corruption Index, the corruption is not only affecting to the public service delivery, as well as it's affecting to the trust from the public. And if we are following the years, the trend among the national statistics, it would show that the public distrust is rising. In addition to that, due to the tradition and low population, all sectoral human resources were facing with the lack of adequate expertise based on human capacities. And following the parliament elections, there are changes in the public service based on political affiliation. Some experts already expressed that this action is a political cleansing process with the nature of malpractice, and it affects negatively to equity and justice in all societal level, not only concerning on the public service. And thirdly, I would like to highlight in terms of democracy, we are experiencing the elements and characteristics of the shrinkage of civic space during the COVID-19. Legislative and administrative measures taken by the state are mostly excluding manner toward the civil society actors, and some legislations are rapidly adopted by without any public concerns or public discussions. And most of fundamental freedoms, such as freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association, and the media freedom were infringed during the measures against the local transmission of COVID-19. And it's already highlighted by the National Human Rights Commission annual report. And in parallel with that, journalists, reporters, trade unionists, environmental activists, and human rights defenders are not able fully to be heard, engaged, or included in the whole process, including policy making or decision-making processes, such as legislative and administrative processes. And human rights monitoring or human rights inquiries were not able to be conducted during the pandemic, even by the National Human Rights Commission. For instance, due to the local transmission or due to the countermeasures against the COVID-19, we would not allow to conduct any human rights monitoring stated by the State Emergency Commission, even to the National Human Rights Commission, which is accredited A status in compliance with the UN Paris Principle. So based on these findings, and I would like to recommend, I would like to suggest such recommendations to the government of Mongolia by your concern. First of all, in order to enhance the efficiency of the National Human Rights Commission, we need to provide financial and technical assistance to the National Human Rights Commission to exercise its new mandates, at least for next 3 years. For instance, new mechanisms against torture and a mechanism for protection of human rights defenders are new practical and new public service elements, which are crucial to abolish malpractice at the national level and create new culture of human rights. And secondly, I would like to suggest to provide more capacity building programs and initiatives to the new mechanisms under the National Human Rights Commission. And thirdly, following the thematic human rights issues, most of the public service and public servants' omission caused by the lack of budget. So in order to prevent from that kind of malpractice, the state of Mongolia shall provide budgetary analysis concerning on the thematic human rights sectors at the public service of Mongolia. For instance, child protection, youth development, universal health coverage, free, quality, and equitable education for all, and social work for all, etc., including elderly people. And in order to strengthen the justice system,
maybe
yes.
Can I ask you to maybe conclude?
Yes.
So sorry about that.
Sure.
I know you.
And in order to strengthen the justice system, we need to ensure the rule of law, including the independence of lawyers and judges. It's already, we have past actions that conducted by the state actors against the independence of lawyers and judges. And lastly, I would like to highlight that we need to promote meaningful participation and social accountability at national level. So these are my speech and my suggested recommendations to all participants. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and sorry for having interrupted you at the end of your presentation. Right, as you could see, it was a really, really packed but very fascinating list of speakers from 6 countries with different situations. Obviously, I mean, with my team at Human Rights Watch, we do follow the 5 Central Asian countries, and we could really see that there are convergences between those countries. We are still looking for a Central Asia that hopefully would be free from some of the most egregious human rights violations which have been documented, free from politically motivated detention, from torture. But we really need to see an EU which continues to be committed to press and to engage with civil society, with governments, as well as publicly for the end of such abuses. We will now be moving towards to our session of questions and answers with participants. There are a number of questions, of course, which already came in via the chat functions or the comments function on Facebook. But do not hesitate to raise your hand if you want to make additional comments, raise questions to our civil society speakers or to the members of the European Parliament who are present today. I'll try to see hands being raised, and I already see a couple of them. Oof, sorry, I'm just struggling with technical aspects. I see 2 hands being raised, but I will start maybe with 2 hands which I see being raised on the chat here. Nurgul Kalova, you have the floor. Please briefly introduce yourself and be brief in your presentation, 1 or 2 minutes max. Nurgul, up to you. Nurgul has technical issues to connect. Maybe Dania Hasenov, who also has a rise, who also has, oh, I have to allow people to talk maybe. Dania, can you speak? Oh. Yes, Dania, you have the floor. Introduce yourself and you have 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dam. Thank you for organizing this event. Okay. Dear honorable members, dear speakers, I'm Dania Hasenov. I'm a human rights activist from Kazakhstan, and I've got 2 questions to members of the European Parliament. So the European Parliament adopted the resolution on the human rights situation in Kazakhstan this year, urging the government of Kazakhstan to amend the law on peaceful assembly so that the freedom is guaranteed and to end all forms of arbitrary detentions. It's been just over 5 months since the adoption of the resolution, but we can see that the authorities of Kazakhstan continue restricting the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and prosecuting peaceful demonstrators. For example, after the adoption of the resolution, the authorities refused to give permission to hold peaceful protests at least 78 times in 20 cities. On July 6th, so last week, when we had nationwide peaceful protests, the authorities arbitrarily detained dozens of activists, and dozens of activists had been preventively arrested before 6th of July. And the Human Rights Commissioner, Mrs. Elvira Azimova, completely ignores political prosecutions of peaceful demonstrators despite our repeated appeals to her. So everything the authorities have been doing is promoting propaganda about human rights reforms, but in fact, nothing meaningful has been done. And regrettably, the EU delegation to Kazakhstan has not visited political prisoners, political trials. They meet with human rights defenders on a selective basis, and they're not publicly active in defending human rights. So my question is, what can we change? What can we do to change this? And my second question is that the EP actually urged the government of Kazakhstan to implement recommendations of the resolution regarding extremism legislation, but the authorities continue abusing extremism charges to prosecute civil society. And after the resolution, at least 24 people were convicted based on extremism charges. And by contrast, in the second half of 2020, when prosecutions increased in their intensity, only 12 people were convicted. So we can see a double increase. But on the positive side, activists could have been imprisoned for up to 17 years. And only because of the resolution, activists are being convicted to restriction of freedom. So my second question is, what else should happen in Kazakhstan so that the EU starts working on a list of personal sanctions against human rights perpetrators in Kazakhstan? Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Before offering the floor to MEPs or speakers who are targeted by the question, I would like to add there were several other similar questions on the chat. What is
Можно
being
мне
done?
выступить? Нургуль Калуова.
Yes, Nurgul, you have the floor for 1 or 2 minutes. Please go ahead.
Да, почему-то камера не включается. Я так выступлю тогда.
It's okay.
Здравствуйте. Здравствуйте, меня зовут Нургуль Калуова. Я правозащитница движения Бостандых из города Павлодар и бывшая политзаключенная. Сегодня я на свободе благодаря резолюции Европарламента, принятой в феврале 2021 года. Я счастлива, что могу сказать вам огромное спасибо за спасение. Я хочу дать свидетельство, как из меня и других политзаключенных выбивали ложные показания, и как, будучи в СИЗО, мы узнали о принятии резолюции Европарламента. Мое дело – показательный пример, как преследуют за публикации в социальных сетях. Меня осудили к 1,5 годам ограничения свободы, 100 часам принудительных работ и 3 годам запрета заниматься общественно-политической деятельностью. Мне угрожали, что посадят меня до 17 лет тюрьмы и держали в одиночной камере. Но когда я по радио услышала о резолюции Европарламента, я поняла, что у меня есть шанс на спасение. Это помогло мне и другим политическим заключенным выстоять под давлением. В чем моя вина? Я делала обучающие видео в ТикТоке, Инстаграм и Фейсбуке, как защищать свои права для молодежи. Состояла в правозащитных и оппозиционных чатах в Телеграм. В приговоре суда прямо написано, что мы критиковали действующую власть в Казахстане, а в правозащитном чате Телеграм мечтали о свержении власти в Казахстане, поддерживая программы ДВК. При этом программы ДВК публично доступны, и они касаются демократических мирных преобразований в стране. В переходе из президентской в парламентскую республику. Суд Назарбаева решил, что мечтать простым гражданам об этом в телеграм-чате опасно для режима. Поэтому меня закрыли на 7 месяцев в СИЗО. При этом оказывалось давление на моих членов семьи, пока я была под арестом. Также из обрывков фраз сотрудников в СИЗО я понимала, что мой сын вместе с правозащитниками пытается добиться международной огласки. Поэтому сотрудники полиции несколько раз вынуждали меня звонить из СИЗО с требованием к сыну остановить правозащитников. Они угрожали мне, что посадят моего сына-студента в тюрьму и отчислят с университета. В июне 2021 года министр МВД Тургумбаев сказал, что заключенных не заставляют давать ложные показания на видео.
Can I please ask you to conclude with a question to the panelists? Sorry for interrupting you, but time is running, so I would like you to maybe ask a question to the panelists.
Да. К сожалению, мы не получили никакой помощи от омбудсмена Эльвиры Азимовой. Также меня и других политзаключенных не посещали дипломаты Евросоюза в СИЗО, не пришли на наши политически мотивированные суды. Я прошу депутатов Европарламента использовать мои свидетельства и материалы дела для рассмотрения вопроса о включении в списки персональных санкций казахских чиновников, председателя КНБ Карима Масимова, генерального прокурора Гизата Нурдаулетова, председателя МВД Ерлана Тургумбаева и других лиц, которых рекомендуют мои коллеги-правозащитники. Мы тоже, как граждане Беларуси и России, хотим иметь шанс на демократическое будущее. Нам нужна ваша поддержка, чтобы остановить ощущение безнаказанности тех, кто политически убивает, пытает и преследует мирных граждан Казахстана. Спасибо большое.
Thanks a lot. I will add a question now coming from the Karaman Foundation, also on the case of, excuse me, I'm losing a little bit, on the case of online harassment by Chinese hackers against people and journalists taking a stand or reporting on the issue of the attacks against Uyghur people, and what can be done in this regard. I think MEP Scholz, if I'm correct, proposed to answer to this question. So I'm just bringing it to the discussion right now. I'd like to offer maybe the speakers to start responding to those few comments and questions. Who would like to take the floor? I think Mr. MEP Scholz, you wanted to respond to this question or maybe to another question. Could I propose you to respond right now?
What can we do against the hackers on certain information channels, etc.? So we have to establish, I would say, common rules, and that must be implemented then. So by all the authorities which are responsible for controlling the rules, etc. So what could be one step in this direction is that we oblige also the Chinese, if are these Chinese hackers, that China is of course also taking the responsibility to assure that there is not a practice of hacking information channels, etc. The same, I would say, is for the state authorities in Kazakhstan or the state authorities of the Russian Federation or even of the European Union. So that is a responsibility of us, and here we have to find a common agreed rules in a more binding, way, as it is very often encouraged today. So the question of data protection, data rules, etc. So the European data protection shield is very, from our point of view, very much advanced. Unfortunately, we have not yet granted or included these same rules into bilateral agreements with third countries. So that is an ongoing debate, and we are insisting from the European Parliament that our safety package must be a benchmark or a horizontal, a comparable structure in as much as possible or as many as possible bilateral agreements. So that would be maybe one short answer. So it's a very complex issue, the hacking practice. Second question I would like to answer is, there was in the chat I have seen the question around corruption, and I would say, what are the reasons for corruption? So the question that there is not granted the same economic and social justice in all the countries, inside the countries and inside the regions as a benchmark, we have to take care that the fight against corruption is one of the, I would say, most burning questions to overcome the human rights violations as well, because that means that with the corruption, you give, or the authorities are taking the right for themselves to double standards. And here I would say we need a much more increased transparency regime introduced into the political and economic reality in the region, in all the countries of the region, and in the bilateral economic relationship. So, I mean, I'm striving for trying to find channels in the reality, in the bilateral relationship between the European Union and the third country, and that is true, of course, also for the countries of the region, to introduce again rules which has to be implemented, and if they are violated, then we need to introduce a sanction system, either against those people who are and responsibility for going in the direction, but it includes, of course, also the economic stakeholders acting in the economic and the political reality in the countries of the region. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, MEP Scholz. There was an interesting question on Facebook, I think, about the impact of the emergence of the Taliban activities in Afghanistan, and the impact this would have on human rights in Central Asia, and how governments that do crack down on peaceful dissent could, really do to address this, and how the EU should and could also help better civil society to cope with this challenge. So I think it's a question both to MEPs and to civil society speakers. I see two requests from the floor. Sorry, I'm just trying to get back to it. And I see MEP Petras Austrevicius, followed by Rosa Thun.
Thank you, Philippe.
Up to you, and then Muhamadjon.
Yes, I'll be very short on a couple of aspects mentioned before. Firstly, I want to congratulate and to thank Nurgul for her statement. And believe me, Nurgul, we will do everything possible, not just towards you, but as well as other political prisoners in wherever they are in the region, from Kazakhstan to other countries, to free them and to make everything possible that the state apologizes for keeping them in that conditions. Secondly, on Afghanistan, indeed, situation is very fragile, and we observe very disturbing developments in Afghanistan. You know that the European Union is the biggest donor to Afghanistan. We are to decide on our next policy line after the troops withdrawal from Afghanistan. But believe me, we really follow the situation, and we will do everything possible to assist all the countries which might be under the impact of the new developments in Afghanistan, including Tajikistan in particular. Thirdly, on corruption, absolutely. I consider corruption as a crime against human rights and very much interlinked. I'm in an initiative group which tries to amend so-called European Magnitsky Act on human rights with the description of corruption, as the corruption is the directly or indirectly crime related to the violation of the human rights. And finally, you know that the European Parliament's Human Rights Committee prepares resolutions on and reports on corruption, and I'll do my best that at this legislature we would have again the report on corruption as violation of the human rights. Thank you, Philippe.
Thanks a lot, Petras. MEP Rosa Thun, followed by Muhamadjon, and I saw that Aziza also managed to connect. So Aziza, if you want to speak for a couple of minutes, I'll give you the floor during the Q&A session in the next few minutes. MEP Thun, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm really extremely impressed by your witnesses, by everything that you told us, that we could hear from you. Also, there are many most interesting questions from your side. Partially, I read them, but listening to you, it's not so easy to read at the same time. Some are in Russian, but I wanted to assure you that we will come back to it, and I would love to come back to you. And I hope also there are many questions to Mrs. Azimova. I hope that she's listening to us. I hope that she's also following this chat on our screens, and that she will answer. I will also talk to her, because I would be also very interested to hear her answers, to you. I would like to follow closely and cooperate if it's possible. We hear those complaints regularly about the representation of the EU in Kazakhstan, especially, that they do not have enough contact with NGOs, that they contact the NGOs on a selective way. And also I find those questions among in the chat. We have already talked to them several times. We continue on this, and we will surely do our best, as we are here from 5 different political groups. We will make pressure on them, I assure you, to change this way of behavior. They are not an extremely numerous representation, but I also am sure that this can be improved, and I hope that really that they will do it. Now, personal sanctions, I read also comments on personal sanctions. I am sure that we will consider this, personal sanctions in all the countries that you represent. We will see what can come out of this, but we as parliamentarians can surely express strongly the need of this. And now, as a citizen of Poland, I wanted to thank all those who demand freedom of Bartosz Kramek. This is a Polish issue within the European Union. He has been put to prison. It's a fighter for human rights, just like yourself. And he's been imprisoned a few weeks ago, and we really do our best to influence the authorities in Poland to free him, because we need people like yourself and like Bartosz Kramek to struggle to be free and struggle for human rights, justice, etc. Thank you, all of you who see that injustice happens in the whole world, and let us remain in solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosa. And I'll move to Muhamadjon. You'd like to respond or make a few additional points?
Thank you very much, Philippe. Can I use this opportunity to say my recommendation to the member, or?
Yes, if you could summarize them in 1 minute. Okay. I think we have seen one speaker, and you wrote them in the chat for those who can consult them. Please go ahead.
Just mention 2, 3 of them, not for all of them. Thank you very much. In 2016, European Parliament adopted a resolution on the situation of prisoners concerns in Tajikistan, but following to that resolution, we don't see any improvement, and the crackdown is ongoing, and we see the number of the prisoners are rising. And also UN Human Rights Committee and UN Group on Arbitrary Detention issued opinion on 15 political prisoners cases. and requested Tajikistan to immediately release them. Muhammad Ali Haitov, Zay Said, Uzurmeh Yorov, lawyer, and RPT leadership, and Maksud Ibrahimov. So my questions, is it timely to adopt new resolution on Tajikistan, because this year in September, Tajikistan is celebrating 30 years anniversary and adopting new resolution and encouraging President Rahman to amnesty all political prisoners, maybe will be affected and heard by the government. And secondly, I'm urging member of the parliament to call on the European Commission to stop any talks toward GCP plus with Tajikistan until improvement in human rights. And also, lastly, I strongly recommend European Parliament and European Commission, External Action Service to adopt Magnitsky sanction against human rights abuser, including the head of the Security Service, Yetimov, and the Minister of Justice, Yusuf Rahman. Mr. Yetimov was nominated to this Magnitsky sanction list to the US, and he is a very potential candidate for the European Magnitsky list. Thank you very much, and I will share this, my full recommendation and speech to the MEPs. And regarding Afghanistan, I'm just as a person who
very briefly,
next to the Afghanistan, Western country, NATO invested $2 billion, and sacrificed thousands of soldiers' life, but without investing in the civil society, in the election, and developing the civil society. Now we see how the government is collapsing and Taliban taking over. So same thing happened in Tajikistan. We saw the emerge of the authoritarian regime in Tajikistan and now Taliban in Afghanistan. So please stick with the human rights and democracy, democratic values, not just supporting the authoritarian regime. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Muhamadjon. And I'd like to give one of our speakers who just managed to join this discussion, Aziza from Kyrgyzstan, Aziza Abdirasulova from the Kilim Shami Foundation. I would like to give you a chance to intervene, although very briefly, Aziza, because we have to move to the concluding remarks. So Aziza, if I can ask you to summarize your points in 2 minutes, maybe it would be great, but we're happy that you could join us in the end.
Спасибо. Я поздно присоединилась, но тем не менее. Я хочу отметить несколько вопросов по Кыргызстану, связанные с правами человека в Кыргызстане. Это первое. Прошу уделять внимание на приграничные зоны. Очень много правонарушений, нарушений прав человека, на свободу передвижений, на свободу от пыток именно в приграничных зонах между Таджикистаном и Кыргызстаном. Это очень больной вопрос. Я думаю, необходимо уделять внимание. В связи с усилением Талибана, как с Афганистана уже переходят этнические кыргызы в сторону Таджикистана, и это составляет какие-то угрозы, вопросы, проблемы для Кыргызстана, это тоже большие вопросы. И внутри Кыргызстана, наверняка уже до меня сказали, как принятие закона об НКО, это тоже уже как бы изменение Конституции, тоже большой вопрос у нас. И вопросов очень много, и при поддержке Кыргызстана я просила бы Европарламента, Евросоюза обратить внимание на две составляющие. Это приграничные зоны и это те населенные пункты, которые страдают от урановых радиаций. Это остается большой проблемой. Проблем очень много, перечислять все не могу, но основные проблемы сегодня именно вот эти две вопросы. И как бы сужение пространства для гражданского общества, сужение пространства для свободы слова, это как бы по Центральной Азии остается проблематичным.
Thank you, Aziza. Thanks for joining despite technical difficulties and for being brief. We're indeed reaching the end of this event. I would like to once again thank all the civil society representatives who joined, and in particular the human rights defenders who briefed MEPs about the situation in their own countries. And I will now give back the floor to members of the European Parliament for some concluding closing remarks. And I will start in the reverse order as what we followed at the opening of the session, and propose Helmut.scholz from the left to give a few concluding comments.
Thank you very much. And I must say, I'm also very much impressed by all the concrete and precise consideration of what is happening in the countries concerning human rights defenders and the need for changing the reality. Second, I think we are understanding as European Parliament that we are one of the addressers. But to be frank, the European Parliament has no binding ability for really changing the situation as it is. So one of the conclusions should be that we are continuing to strive for giving the European Parliament also the legislative initiative right to do something, also in regard to this need for supporting human rights defenders in other areas and regions of the world, and in particular, of course, also in Kazakhstan and Tajikistan and other countries. Third remark, I would say we also have to recognize that the policy which has been carried out by the United States, by a lot of EU member states in Afghanistan, has not helped to change the situation. So maybe it has even worse. And now, and the question of the challenging to the other countries in the region affected by the policy of the Taliban is, of course, calling us to be very attentive, to be supportive to your struggle for, I would say, democratizing the societies. And that would be my final remark. We should continue to cooperate for democratizing the societies, for establishing transparency. And thank you for all the cases you have given us as concrete examples where we can do something and where we need to do much more. And so transparency, democracy, and citizens' participation and decision-making is very much needed, and is very much in the work of the European Parliament. I can only but express we will continue to be on your side in your struggle for democratic perspective in your country. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot. I think some of the MEPs have left, but I'd like to propose Petras Austrevicius to take the floor next for concluding remarks.
Thank you, Philippe. And I do thank you all the participants who found a good time to speak up and in fact to provide us with a very good analysis on the ground. I know how it is challenging to have very squeezed time for presentation. All countries are different, having something in specific, but thank you indeed. A couple of things from my side. Well, indeed, corruption is something what we have to follow, and this, nomenclatura style, Soviet style policy line is very much interlinked with corruption. So thank you for this reminding point. And as I said, I mean, we have some ideas how to tackle this. Again, we do face activities of gongos, not real NGOs. And we ask you, I mean, to identify those gongos from your side, because sometimes, they apply for assistance, they make public statements, and it's really time wasting, I would say, even to work with them and to have contact. So please be very strong in making your comments on the right time, who is not falling into the category of real NGOs. And finally, from my side, if I could ask you, each of you from every country, I mean, we had 6 countries in Central Asian region, to present from your side 5 priorities. What do you think are the most important things or fields some changes should be made? That might serve us, as a good basis to make a kind of checking list of things which we might follow and we will follow with our reports and our statements and our engagement, generally speaking. So thank you once again for your participation. Thank you for your activities and your bravery in this regard. Human rights and the situation of all democratic societies are at most important to all of us. Thank you. Spasibo.
Thank you, Petras. And I saw that heidihautal, who had disconnected, is still with us, in fact. So Vice President Hautala, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've been observing through my assistant who has reported the discussions, and I join the thanks by Petras to all of our guests, and I really applaud the work you're doing, your courage, and I thank you for your recommendations. We will all look into them together. And we have heard your criticism also about the EU delegations. This is an issue that we can do something about. So they can certainly do more, especially in Kazakhstan. I also want to tell you that we are already, as Parliament, very aware of this kind of misuse of election observation missions. And because it's a public information, I have to tell you, if nobody mentioned it already, that the Parliament has given a warning to those who went to this so-called election observation in Kazakhstan in January. Including the head of the Parliament's delegation to Central Asia, Mr. Martuchello. So this is a serious issue. It's not only happening in Central Asia, it's happening elsewhere as well. And we have to tackle that because we only can observe elections that we know fulfill the basic requirements of fair and free elections. So I really think that we need to talk together. And I also think it would be a good idea if the Subcommittee on Human Rights, together with the delegation, would invite the 6 legal defenders to Brussels to talk to, first of all, talk to one another and to talk with us about how we can support this important institution, that it is truly independent and fulfills the criteria of a true legal defender and ombudsman, according to the model that we have learned to appreciate it. So thank you very much, and thanks for everyone.
Thank you. And for the final word, I'd like to ask Rosa Thun to also come in for some concluding remarks. Rosa, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much. I can only join my excellent colleagues in thanking you and admiring your involvement, endurance, courage, and everything you do. I can only wish to all of us to remain in touch. We will follow your fate, what is going on with you personally, also with other people about and all those you communicate to us, names you send to us. We will try to do our best to know about them, make the cases public, and also try to stay in touch with you. And please do not hesitate to write to us. Our emails are easy to be found. We are on social media, and we are very happy about all contacts. We will, as I said before, we didn't answer to all your questions and comments that we read. This is to all the participants, but we treat them very seriously and we will follow on them. We do not rule the world, so we will not solve, unfortunately, the problems in your countries, as we do not solve all problems in our member states. We also have problems here, but it's extremely important that we work on them together. And if we make together a step forward, and this is possible, and communicate also the problems and follow your recommendations, surely at least a step forward we can do, and step by step I do believe that we will improve the fate of people who suffer, and also improve the level of democracy, which in the whole world, frankly speaking, is urgently needed. But it always happens through persons like yourself, and we will do our utmost to be involved, at least to a small extent as you are. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks a lot. A lot of follow-up about... Sorry, there is a big echo on my side. A lot to follow up from this discussion, but it's time to wrap up. So I'd like to once again thank the 5 MEPs and their political groups for the support for this event. I think we have a lot to stay in touch with, and I will close the discussion for now, but it's unfinished business, obviously, and all human rights defenders, together with international organizations, will remain in touch with you to continue to profile human rights in EU's Central Asia agenda and in the European Parliament's attention to the region. Once again, thanks a lot for your time, and we'll be in touch very soon. Have a great day.
Philippe, and I want to thank all the people who've been engaged and probably were not visible in this event, but our assistants and all the rest experts who worked relentlessly to make this event happen. Thank you, and thank you, Human Rights Watch. See you next time.
And the interpreters as well, as traditionally, they have been wonderful. Have a great day.